We all know that Death Valley is one of the hottest, driest places on Earth. A desert basin where temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit and rainfall averages less than 2 inches per year. But what if I told you that rangers and researchers working in the valley have documented 7 phenomena that violate our understanding of physics, geology, and natural behavior? Discoveries so disturbing that certain coordinates are now restricted even to trained personnel. Areas where instruments malfunction, where temperatures fluctuate impossibly, and where visitors vanish following patterns that suggest something more deliberate than chance. Doesn't make sense, does it? A national park monitored by satellite, patrolled by rangers, visited by hundreds of thousands annually, yet holding secrets that authorities acknowledge privately but won't discuss publicly. Yet these phenomena persist across the valley's salt flats, canyon systems, and mountain ranges, documented in reports that remain classified or heavily redacted. Today, we're uncovering 7 disturbing discoveries from Death Valley that rangers can't explain, and the reasons why parts of America's hottest desert remain mysteriously off-limits. Death Valley National Park spans over 3.4 million acres of extreme landscape, from the lowest point in North America at Badwater Basin, 282 feet below sea level, to peaks exceeding 11,000 feet. The region's name comes from 49ers who attempted to cross it during the California Gold Rush, many perishing in the attempt. But the valley's dangers aren't limited to heat and dehydration. Over the decades, rangers and researchers have encountered phenomena that challenge natural law, events documented with scientific instruments, yet remaining unexplained despite investigation. The first discovery involves what park authorities initially dismissed as a surveying error, but has since become one of Death Valley's most documented mysteries: the sailing stones of Racetrack Playa. This remote dry lake bed, accessible only by rough dirt roads that test even 4-wheel drive vehicles, is scattered with rocks ranging from pebbles to boulders weighing hundreds of pounds. The stones sit on a perfectly flat surface of cracked mud, and behind each one stretches a trail, a groove in the playa showing that the rocks have moved, sometimes hundreds of feet, across ground where no water flows and where winds, even the strongest recorded, shouldn't generate enough force to move such massive objects. The trails are perfectly straight in some cases, in others following curved or zigzag patterns that suggest the rocks change direction multiple times during their movement. What makes this discovery particularly disturbing isn't that the rocks move. Researchers now understand that rare combinations of rain, ice, and wind can create conditions where the stones slide across thin sheets of ice, but rather the patterns observed before this explanation was confirmed. In the 1990s, archaeologists studying the playa documented something that still doesn't fit the ice sheet theory. They found trails that appeared overnight, fresh grooves in the mud that weren't there the previous afternoon, created during conditions when no rain had fallen, no ice had formed, and weather stations recorded winds below 10 miles per hour. Far too weak to move rocks weighing 50 or 60 pounds. Even more unsettling, they discovered rocks that had moved in opposite directions simultaneously, leaving trails that crossed each other, but showed no evidence of collision, as if the stones had passed through the same space at different times, or had been lifted and placed, rather than sliding across the surface. Dr. Richard Norris, a paleobiologist from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, who led a comprehensive study of the sailing stones, installed GPS units on several rocks and set up time-lapse cameras to finally document their movement. His team confirmed that ice sheets were responsible for most movements, but they also recorded anomalies. One rock moved during a period when temperature sensors showed the playa remained above freezing for 72 consecutive hours, eliminating the ice explanation. Another stone, monitored continuously for 2 years, suddenly relocated 40 feet from its previous position during a 6-hour window when the camera's data storage malfunctioned. Either investigators attributed to electromagnetic interference from an unknown source. When rangers visited the playa the next day, they found the stone in its new location, the GPS unit still transmitting from coordinates that were impossible given the device's last known position. The rock had somehow moved not in a straight line following its previous trail, but perpendicular to it, as if it had been picked up and placed rather than sliding naturally. The GPS data showed an impossible vertical displacement, suggesting the stone had been lifted several feet off the ground before being set down in its new location. Park authorities quietly removed the monitoring equipment after this incident and ceased publicizing their research on the sailing stones, despite the phenomenon remaining one of the park's most popular attractions. When asked about the anomalies, park geologists now refer questions to the National Park Service's Public Affairs Office, which provides only the official explanation about ice sheets and wind, making no mention of the cases that don't fit this model or the equipment failures that seem to coincide with the most inexplicable movements. The second discovery emerged from Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, and one of the hottest places ever recorded on Earth. The basin is a vast salt flat where water occasionally pools after rare rainstorms before quickly evaporating, leaving behind crystalline patterns of salt that create surreal geometric landscape. In 2007, a park ranger conducting a routine patrol at dawn noticed something impossible: fresh footprints crossing the salt flats, perfectly preserved in the crystalline surface, leading from the basin's edge toward the center before disappearing entirely, not ending at any landmark or feature, but simply stopping mid-stride as if whoever made them had vanished into the air. The ranger, Michael Santos, followed the prints, photographing them as documentation. The footprints were clearly human, bare feet, adult-sized, pressed deeply into the salt crust, with definition that suggested significant weight. They were remarkably fresh, the edges sharp and uncollapsed, indicating they'd been made recently, probably within the previous few hours. But several factors made them disturbing. First, the prints showed no signs of the characteristic gait changes one would expect from someone walking across an uneven surface. The stride length remained perfectly consistent, as if the individual was walking on flat pavement rather than across broken salt formations. Second, the depth of the impression suggested someone weighing at least 200 pounds, yet the salt surface between footprints showed no evidence of arms touching down for balance or any indication of the person carrying equipment or supplies, which would be necessary for anyone attempting to cross the basin at night. Third, and most unsettling, the footprints led directly toward an area where temperatures had exceeded 130 degrees Fahrenheit the previous afternoon, heat sufficient to cause second-degree burns on exposed skin within minutes. Yet the prints suggested someone had walked barefoot across this surface. Santos radioed for assistance and continued following the trail. The footprints maintained their consistent stride for approximately half a mile before abruptly ending, not fading gradually as if obscured by wind, not reaching the edge of a harder surface where they'd naturally disappear, but simply stopping. The last clear impression showed a left foot. The right foot that should have followed left no mark at all, and there were no prints leading away in any direction. No indication of where the individual went after that final step. When backup rangers arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the area, finding no body, no abandoned clothing or equipment, no explanation for the prints or where their creator had gone. They took measurements and additional photographs, noting that the prints were unusually deep and the pressure distribution was odd, deeper at the heel and ball of the foot than would be expected from normal walking. A forensic analyst who later examined the photographs noted that the arch area showed compression patterns consistent with someone walking on tiptoe or in a position that wouldn't be sustainable for the distance covered. Even stranger, when rangers returned to the site the following day to take plaster casts of the prints for further analysis, they discovered that the footprints had vanished, not filled in by wind or degraded by exposure, but gone entirely. The salt surface where they had been appeared undisturbed, as if it had never been walked upon. The photographs Santos had taken proved the prints existed, but the site itself showed no trace of them, not even subtle depressions or color variations that would indicate disturbance. The incident was filed in a report that was later classified under park security protocols, and when researchers from outside institutions requested access to study the photographs, they were denied. Santos himself transferred to another park within the year and has declined to discuss the incident in any interview. But the footprints that vanished aren't an isolated case. Since 2007, rangers have documented at least 5 similar occurrences of mysterious tracks appearing and disappearing on Badwater Basin, always following the same pattern, appearing overnight, leading toward the basin center, ending abruptly, and vanishing within 24 to 48 hours. If you're fascinated by national park mysteries that defy explanation, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us continue bringing you discoveries that authorities won't publicly acknowledge. Now, let's return to Death Valley's forbidden zones, because the most disturbing findings lie ahead. The third discovery involves Furnace Creek, one of the few permanent water sources in Death Valley and the location of park headquarters and visitor facilities. In 2011, park maintenance workers repairing a water line near the creek bed excavated about 3 feet down when their equipment struck something metallic. Assuming it was a forgotten utility line, they carefully exposed the object, only to discover it wasn't a pipe or cable, but a geometric structure, panels of metal arranged in what appeared to be deliberate patterns, angles and joints that didn't match any known construction technique. The metal itself was unusual. Analysis later revealed it to be an alloy of copper, silver, and trace elements including osmium, a composition not matching any standard industrial alloy. The structure was partially exposed, extending deeper into the ground than the workers could safely excavate without heavy equipment. What they could see formed what one worker described as the corner of something much larger, panels approximately 6 feet by 4 feet, connected by seams that showed no evidence of welding or riveting, as if the entire structure had been cast or formed as a single piece. Carbon dating of soil samples immediately surrounding the metal suggested it had been buried for at least 2,000 years, far predating any European presence in North America, and conflicting with everything known about indigenous peoples' metallurgical capabilities in the region. The workers reported the find to park archaeologists, who arrived to document the structure. Initial photographs showed the metal panels relatively clean, despite their apparent age. The surface bearing geometric patterns that some researchers compared to circuit designs or schematic diagrams, though far more complex than any known technology from antiquity. But before a full excavation could be organized, park administrators intervened. The site was immediately covered with a tarp, the excavation was filled back in, and the area was declared off-limits pending an environmental impact assessment. That assessment, if it was ever completed, has never been made public. Requests filed under the Freedom of Information Act produced only heavily redacted documents that confirm something was found but provide no details about its nature, origin, or current status. One unredacted paragraph describes the object as a potentially significant archaeological find that requires further study by qualified specialists. But no follow-up studies have been announced or published. Workers involved in the initial discovery were required to sign non-disclosure agreements, unusual for routine maintenance employees who typically aren't privy to sensitive information. One worker who spoke anonymously to a local newspaper before the agreements were enforced described the metal as warm to the touch, despite being buried 3 feet underground, and said that when they first exposed it, their excavator's electrical system malfunctioned, the engine dying without warning and refusing to restart until they had moved away from the site. The machine was later inspected by mechanics who found no mechanical issues that would explain the failure. To this day, the area near Furnace Creek where the structure was found remains closed to public access, marked only by a small sign indicating ecological restoration in progress. No restoration work has been observed, and rangers who patrol the area report that their handheld radios experience unusual static and interference when they approach the coordinates where the excavation occurred. Electronic disruption that ceases as soon as they move a few hundred feet away. The fourth discovery involves temperature anomalies that violate basic thermodynamic principles. Death Valley holds the record for the highest reliably recorded temperature on Earth, 134 degrees Fahrenheit, measured at Furnace Creek on July 10, 1913. The valley's heat is famous, legendary, dangerous. But in certain locations, rangers have documented temperature readings that don't make sense. Areas where thermometers record temperatures that are impossible given surrounding conditions, gradients so extreme they shouldn't naturally occur. The most well-documented case involves a slot canyon in the Panamint Range, one of the mountain chains bordering Death Valley. In 2014, a group of rangers conducting a wilderness inventory entered a narrow canyon that previous surveys had noted as unusually cool. A